Welcome to the InfoWars Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Thursday, April 2nd, 2015. Here are our top stories.
Tonight, over 100 murdered in a Kenya campus attack. Then, a new executive order is no April Fool's joke. And the feds fight with the Bundys. Again, that's next on the InfoWars Nightly News.
But I know this, folks, we got criminals running the show. They're trying to mop up opposition. It's time to stand up and open a can of whoop ass on them politically.
Well, there was a terrorist attack in Kenya today at a university. 147 people killed, over 500 were captured and eventually freed, with only 4 gunmen. 79 students were injured. Many of the students were killed during morning prayers at a mosque. However, the terrorists were Muslims and specifically targeted Christians. They say the gunmen separated Christians from Muslims. Explosives were reportedly staged around the Christian hostages, and gunmen attended the morning prayers at the same campus mosque before they headed to the dorm. Now, the interesting thing about this is how helpless the people were. As they pointed out, they heard heavy gunfire. They didn't know where to run. They wound up running, many of them, at the terrorist, had to run past the terrorist. This is the same country, the same group, Al-Shabaab, the same country, Kenya, where we also saw a siege just about a year and a half ago. At that time, there was a siege in a mall, if you recall, that lasted for 4 days and ended up in the death of 60 civilians. Now, one of the things that was very noteworthy that happened in the aftermath of that, we reported at Infowars.com, the chief of Interpol went there, Secretary General Ronald Noble, and he had this to say. He said, ask yourself, if that was Denver, Colorado, if that was Texas, would those guys have been able to spend hours, days shooting people? Remember, this was days that this siege went on. He said, no, what I'm saying here is it makes police around the world question their views on gun control. It makes citizens question their views on gun control. You have to ask yourself, is an armed citizenry more necessary now than it was in the past with an evolving threat of terrorism? This is something that has to be discussed. Unfortunately, in Kenya, that's not the discussion that they're having. In Kenya, the article on USA Today reports that they say, well, we've suffered unnecessarily because we don't have enough manpower. That's the message that the Kenyan government is saying. They say Kenya badly needs additional officers, and I will not keep the nation waiting. And that was the president of Kenya speaking. Just understand, however, that if you have the people armed, as Alex Jones pointed out earlier today, as happened here in Austin when you had a shooter at the top of a tower, it was the armed citizenry that held him off initially. It was the armed citizenry that helped the police take him out, capture him, kill him. That's what is called posse comitatus. That's the real posse comitatus. That's not just an act that was enacted to keep the president from using the military as police force. No, posse comitatus means the power of the community. That was shortened to posse, but that was originally the intention, that the citizens would help the police. I don't think that adding a lot more police is really going to help them. It took several hours even today for the police to get there. Even though it didn't take days to end this siege, many people died. 147 died, 79 injured in the amount of time that it took the police to get there. And there were only 4 terrorists. Think about that. And think about the fact that the police in this country, even though we have a massive number of police, we have to ask ourselves, do we have too few police? Do you realize that we had more police per capita in New York than we did soldiers in Iraq when we were trying to occupy that nation? Yet we're not being made safer. In many cases, it's the police themselves that become a danger to us, as we see very many times. Look at this article that just came out on Huffington Post. Over 100 people were killed by the police nationwide in America in just the month of March. And actually, there were still a couple of days left in March when they came out with that. They say that's an average of more than 3 people killed per day in March by the police in America. And last week's Department of Justice report pointed out that the Philadelphia police had shot 400 people, over 80% of them African American, in just 7 years. They say this is a city where the police commissioner is now the author of the very same White House task force report that is calling for police reform. Maybe what we need to do is take the advice of the Interpol officer. We need to have an armed citizenry. We need to have the power of the community.
This morning at around 5:30, there were reports of gunfires being heard in the Garissa University College, and according to eyewitnesses and those who survived this siege, the gunmen, at least 4 of them, some describe them to be masked, others describe them to be wearing military combats, and some even say that a few are wearing black. So it really depends on who you ask, but gunmen, a known number at that time, entered the university and shot sporadically, starting with the guardman, the security guard who was guarding the main gate of the school. They were able to access the school, and however swift the police response were, they were not sufficient. The Kenya Defense Forces joined them actually, and later on when the siege situation took place, at least 270 students were unaccounted for, but police were able to do last-minute rescues in one dormitory where the gunmen had taken hostage a few of the students, and the police were able to take control of the situation after 12 hours of waiting and trying, and able to rescue a few people. But out of those, we're hearing 147 dead. As you said, most of them are students. We know 2 security guards are also dead, and as well as the 4 gunmen, as you mentioned. The police have also released now a wanted man who is called Mohammed Muhammad alias Diliadun, who's wanted and is said to be the mastermind of this attack in Garissa. The police are offering more than $200,000 US for any information leading to his arrest.